Jila Chupansho Idam Mandala Sange Chodam Soki Chonala Janju Vadu Dagi Kyapsuchi Dagi Chinyen Gibe Sonami Rola Pinchi Sange Chupansho Sange Chodam Soki Chonala Janju Vadu Dagi Kyapsuchi Dagi Jinyen Gimpe Sonamgi Jola Penchu Sange Chupansho Sange Chudam Soki Chonam La Janchu Badu Dagi Kapsuchi Dagi Jinyen Sonamgi Jola Penchu Sange Chupansho. So we'll start with a few moments of silent meditation to try to help shift the mind away from the activities and the busyness of the day and into a more neutral, calm, and collected space. So we'll start with some breathing meditation. Please check to see that your spine is straight and you're breathing comfortably through your nose if possible. We'll begin by watching rounds of the breath, one exhalation and one inhalation being one round. Just focus your attention and your awareness on the sensation of the breath in the nostrils. Try to count 21 rounds without being distracted and thinking other thoughts. Please bring your awareness to the space in front of you and think of the holy being that you are closest to, whatever saint or holy being you feel the closest connection to. Invite them to join you in the space in front of you. In your mind, you can visualize them or just think of them and feel their presence. Try to be very clear. Pick a quality that you admire most in them and see it or think of it or feel it clearly. In your mind, ask them to help you develop that in yourself, cultivate it, and manifest it, and embody it. And then you can see them happily agree or feel that they assent to that, and they become smaller and smaller until they are a glowing, small figure of light which melts into your hearts, blessing your mind stream and your capacity. Abiding in your heart to bless you to become this. Well, thank you for coming. Homage to all holy beings everywhere. Tonight we're talking about wisdom. We're on the 192nd class in the series or some such thing. Going towards, what is it, about 200 to wrap it up, right? We're almost there. Kind of interesting to think of it in those terms, huh? So we're on the final review classes, right, in the home stretch. And we've reached the review of Master Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life on the Wisdom chapter, chapter 9, where Master Shantideva is focusing upon wisdom and the explanation of that, right? I don't know if you remember from the original materials. Do you remember what happened at this point, Master Shantideva, the sort of historical circumstances of Master Shantideva teaching material? Can you remember this story?
Yeah, he started to float away.
Yeah, he was. Do you remember the whole story?
He was Mr. Three Thoughts.
Yeah. And he was in the monastery. They called him Mr. Three Thoughts, right? What were the three thoughts?
Sleeping, eating. I went next door.
Yeah, eating, sleeping, and going to the bathroom, right?
Yeah.
And so they disparaged him because that's all they ever saw him do. They only saw him, eat, sleep, and go to the bathroom. And they didn't think he studied or meditated or anything else. And so they built a high throne for him to teach, in the hopes of embarrassing him into leaving the monastery, right? Yeah. And so, remember?
Yeah. So they set the throne. Is it called a throne?
Yeah. When typically in a Tibetan monastery, when you teach, there's a throne, a high throne. Yeah. You have to go up steps to get to it, so that you're sitting above the assembly because there was no PA system or anything else.
Right. So they made it without steps, so it was impossible for him to get to the top of it. It was like a big gag. And then when he went up to go teach, all of a sudden he was at the top, and he started teaching, and he blew everybody's mind.
Yeah, they thought he was going to really be a fool and embarrass himself, and so he started teaching his own original scriptural material that he created, and sort of shocked all of the monastic community of thousands and tens of thousands of monks. And as he was teaching, it became more and more profound. And then as he got to the later chapters of the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, the scriptures say he started to levitate off the throne and to rise into the air. And then it was only monks who had meditative realizations, who had clairaudience, and who could actually hear him as he moved further and further away from the monastery. And so once you get into the later chapters, there's even disagreement about whether he taught those things, because they've become deeper and deeper and more profound and harder to understand. It was only those realized meditators who could hear and understand the final chapters that he was teaching. And then he disappeared, and they went and found him in another part of India some years later and begged him to come back. And of course he said no.
But didn't he write some stuff? Didn't he write something down?
He did. He had composed the Bodhisattva Charya Avatara, and he had left it in the rafters of his room. He said, you shouldn't disparage monks who you don't know much about, and if you want the text, you can find them in the rafters of my room, which they did find. And so that's the text that we have, right? So that's sort of the backdrop, right? And this is the final course on the guide, and it's his infamous chapter on wisdom, right? It's a little bit difficult. So we have class tonight and next week to cover the wisdom chapter, right? Next week, and so this is Lord Maitreya's commentary on the 9th chapter. It's his take on it, and Holy Ken Rinpoche taught Gyaltsen Pa's commentary for 10 years in Howell, New Jersey, and we're using Lord Maitreya's commentary. It's very sweet because it bridges the gap between karma and emptiness. Emptiness being synonymous with ultimate reality or the ultimate nature of things. And so this presentation is very beautiful because it makes that connection. It's very hard to find a scriptural source where they link ethics and wisdom, right? Ethics and the nature of reality. So this is a very beautiful explanation. So when you start to study Buddhism and you get into it, it can be a little bit frustrating because people study a little bit, they learn a little bit about karma, they learn a little bit about the nature of projection, they learn a little bit about emptiness, and then they start walking around saying, well, it's just your projection, man. That's your karma, man. And a little bit of understanding is dangerous. Right? So it can be very frustrating to get the beginnings of a Buddhist education and then not really be able to take it further and understand what to do with it and how to integrate it into your life and how to apply it to bring an end to pain and suffering. Right? So this is a very beautiful explanation of that. And so it really brings it down to a granular level of how do I apply an understanding of emptiness to my life? How do I apply karma and emptiness to my life? What is the relationship between karma and emptiness? How do I live it? How do I use it? Right? And so Lord Maitreya's presentation comes in the Uttara Tantra, and it's one of the 5 great books that Lord Maitreya dictated to Master Asanga. So Master Asanga really gets the credit. He's the sort of a noted author in the scriptures, and it was dictated to him by Maitreya. Okay? So it talks about how understanding emptiness can get me out of the suffering realm, how understanding ultimate reality and the nature of things can bring a permanent end to all suffering and to all affliction. Okay, so there's a scripture say you can't end your afflictions and you can't end your suffering unless you have a profound understanding of emptiness and reality. Right? It's not enough to just try to be a good person. It's not enough to just study a little bit of this and that. It's not enough to meditate. You have to have some kind of really deep penetration into the nature of reality and how things exist to be able to put an end to all suffering and to all afflictions and all pain of the world. Right? So Lord Maitreya outlines 6 steps that bring about suffering. And he talks about how is it that suffering arises in our lives? How is it that suffering arises in the world? Where does suffering come from? What's the cause of suffering, right? And, we're going to talk about emptiness primarily, ties in with karma, obviously, but the main focus is going to be on emptiness, right? So he starts off with the idea that we have these seeds, buckshocks, right? in our mind stream. So from a Buddhist perspective, we've always existed, we always will exist in our most subtle mind streams on continuously forever, right? No beginning, no end. And so our karmic seeds, our karmic imprints, our subtle nature is our mind stream, and that's what continues on from life to life. And so when we die, our mind streams on to the next life, right? So he says, look, we've had seeds, karmic seeds in our mind from beginningless time to perceive things in an ignorant way, right? So he says, we come into this world with a mind and with mental imprints and mental functions which are flawed, which are deeply flawed, and which by their very nature cause us and force us to relate to the world and perceive the world in an afflicted way and in the wrong way, in the way which is not the ultimate reality, which is not ultimate reality, right? So he starts with the idea that your seeds, your bakchaks, are the thing which bring you to the suffering life. If we're born in the human realm, it's an indication that we have an afflicted mind. Our mind stream, at the end of our last life, our mind continued, and we took rebirth with this mind and body, right? Our mind stream contains the sum total of our karmic seeds, positive and negative, right? Those karmic seeds, as they ripen, bring about our perception and our reality, right? Everything that we experience is the ripening of karmic seeds in our mind stream. So every perception that we have is a function, obviously, of how our mind processes things. We take in information through our senses, the mind interprets it, the mind processes it, the mind projects whatever conceptualization and reality that the mind is capable of, right? So if you're what is called an animal, your mind functions in a particular way to perceive and project and experience the world that way. If you're what's called a human being, it's because your mind functions in a particular way, your senses function in a particular way, and your mind projects a particular reality. Said more simply, because we see the world the way we do, because we have this sort of shared reality, we call ourselves humans, right? And so the seeds that we bring with us in our mind stream, which ripen into this experience of a human realm, right, are fundamentally afflicted. If we had a more pure mind, if we had a more pure collection of karmic seeds in our mind stream, we would be, by definition, experiencing a purer realm and a purer reality, right? The nature of perception, the nature of reality is such that whatever our mind is able to process, whatever our mind is able to perceive, is our reality, right? If I had a mind, if I had senses which perceived a different wave, just to take it at a scientific level, if I had senses which perceived the different wavelengths of light and different frequencies of sound and all the rest, right? Different tactile sensations, etc., and my mind processed those inputs in a different way, I would be a different kind of being, So that could be for better or for worse, right? I could be a much more pure being than I am right now, with a much more pure mind than I have right now, which is perceiving a more refined level of reality, a more beautiful level of reality, a purer, more holy level of reality, right? I could be existing and functioning in a way where I have senses which can only take in certain kinds of information, and a mind which can only process and interpret certain kinds of information, and where I can only project certain kinds of concepts and experiences and realities, right? That would make me a being of a different realm, not a human being, right? So that's the general idea of the nature of perception and projection, right? And so when we're talking about the wisdom chapter, all of this is implicit as an underlying basis to understand these things, right? If we're talking about wisdom, if we're talking about ultimate reality, if we're talking about the nature of things, it's always based upon the fundamental idea that perception is reality. Right? Whatever I perceive and whatever I conceive and whatever I project is my reality. And that creates my existence. I'm existing up here or down here based upon how my senses and mind are perceiving and conceptualizing and projecting, right? So it could be way down here in huge suffering, or it could be here at ups and downs and all around, which is basic human existence within a certain spectrum, or it could be way up here, which is nothing but good stuff for however long, and then the next life comes, right? Which would be called a form of a higher realm rebirth, right? So, that said, Lord Maitreya says that we have these seeds in our mind, which were planted infinite past lives, where we chronically misunderstand the nature of existence. Throughout infinite past lives, we have misperceived how things exist. We have always thought things exist in a certain way, which is ignorant, which is wrong. And we continue to perceive things as existing incorrectly in an ignorant way. Ignorant from the perspective of wisdom and ultimate reality. So we talk about two levels of reality, right? There's our conventional apparent reality, the way in which we normally perceive and relate to things, ordinary life. I'm you, you're me, the wall is over there, it has its nature, I'm John, I have my nature. And then there's ultimate reality, right? Or emptiness, which is the ultimate way in which things really exist, which we cannot perceive with our ordinary human senses, and which we can only perceive in a certain deep state of meditation, right? So, what Lord Maitreya says is that these seeds in our mind have been there for infinite past lives, and every lifetime, moment by moment, we're chronically misperceiving reality. And because we chronically misperceive the nature of reality, we have vast numbers of seeds of ignorance. And so every being which is born in the suffering realm, in any suffering realm, from an amoeba, to an elephant, to, craving spirit, to, form or formless realm being, all have the seeds of ignorance in their mind. Right? You call them dakzin in Tibetan. And so it's grasping to something which doesn't exist, born with seeds in your mind, to think things exist in a way which is wrong. And so we think things exist in a way which is wrong. It's like thinking that there's a Santa Claus. When you're a kid, you really think Santa Claus exists. Up to a certain age, you think there really is a Santa Claus, and you really believe in Santa Claus, and Santa Claus really exists for you, right? At a certain point, you have some perception, and then you understand Santa Claus doesn't exist, and that was just a wrong idea. And it's the same idea about our reality. We just didn't get to the perception that we're wrong yet. And so this is the idea of studying and meditating, is to come to that place. And so the irony is that, according to Master Shantideva and Lord Maitreya, is that we have spent infinite past lives grasping to things and chasing after things and collecting negative karma, trying to get things which don't even exist, really. They exist in a certain way, they don't exist in the way we relate to them. So, and we'll talk about it more. So it's like suffering is triggered by believing in the Santa Claus, which doesn't even exist. So it's like, if you think of the analogy of a kid who's like, I'll beat everybody up in my class so that Santa Claus gives me the presents I want. That's kind of how we live our lives, right? I'll be faster than everybody. I'll be stronger than everybody. I'll be more powerful than everybody. I'll dominate everyone. I'll do whatever it takes to get things from people so that I can have what I want to be happy, right? It's like Santa Claus, It's like it doesn't work that way. It's crazy, but we don't realize that. It's kind of nuts. So we have to fix that, and we have to straighten that out, and we have to identify what it is that's not there. So Buddhism would say the way we relate to the world is just wrong. The way we normally, conventionally perceive things and think of things and conceptualize things is just wrong. Okay, and so we have to address that. And we have to get to that. And it's why do we misunderstand the world? Is it some like Christian guilt thing? It's like we're bad. You're a bad Buddhist. You misunderstand the world and you misrelate to the world and you're bad and you feel guilty. No. It's not about, the point is not to say, poor me, bad me, I'm living life wrong and I'm a bad Buddhist and I'm stupid and whatever. So it's not the point, it's not a guilt trip, and we're born that way. Our mind functions that way. The very basic functional nature of our mind is to misperceive reality. The fact that we're born here as human beings, means that we have a mind which can only function to perceive things incorrectly, full of affliction, full of suffering, with upside down, backward, wrong view, right? Sadly, okay? And it's like seeing the Matrix. I mean, I remember, when the Matrix first came out many years ago, I don't know how many years ago. It's like that, it's like everybody has a certain perception, and they're all asleep, right? And at some point, something happens where you kind of wake up and see everything differently. And it's a completely opposite, different reality than you thought existed. And that's really what we're talking about when we talk about conventional and ultimate reality. We're all seeing this sort of this whole world and this whole existence and this whole reality, which is valid and true for us, but it isn't the right one. It isn't what's really there. I won't say really, but it's not what's ultimately there. Okay, so and in Buddhism they say there are two basic kinds of beings in the world. There are those who are like children. They haven't woken up. They haven't seen ultimate reality, and there are those who have seen or experienced ultimate reality. Those who are wholly enlightened beings, high beings, and that's the basic division of all existing beings. Those who understand and perceive and know about and live in accordance with ultimate reality or emptiness, and those who don't, whom are basically afflicted and ignorant, right? And so, if you're an ordinary person, who knows? Who's an ordinary person? I can't read people's minds. It could be that everyone in this room is an enlightened being, right? And is here for my benefit and is simply trying to help me along to, remember these things and learn these things and talk about these things so that I can be less ignorant, right? And so, we have to get to that point. So Lord Maitreya is saying, look, you have the seeds in your mind, infinite pastime. You have these seeds for ignorance. You have these seeds to grasp things as existing incorrectly. Seeds to misperceive the world, right? To understand the world and relate to the world in the wrong way, which have been in your mind for your infinite past lives. Well, you have seeds in your mind. What happens next? The second thing that happens is seeds ripen. I mean, when we talk about karma and the nature of perception, right? The nature of reality, we've collected vast numbers of karmic seeds in the past through thinking, speaking, and action, right? There's karma of body, speech, and mind. Every time you think a thought, you're collecting mental karma. Every time you say something, you're collecting verbal karma. Every time you do something, you're collecting physical karma, right? So we have these vast numbers of karmic seeds that we've collected, that we carry in our mind stream, right? So those karmic seeds flower, they ripen, they come up, they bring their result. An impulse arises, right? An experience. And then we act upon it. So when Lord Maitreya is talking about this, he says, look, you've got countless seeds for ignorance from all your past lives. They ripen. They assert themselves. That's the second step in his 6-step progression of how we collect suffering karma, right? First thing he says is, you're born with it. You have Dakzin Bakcha. You have vast numbers of karmic seeds to perceive things ignorantly, right? They're in your mind stream when you're born. Every sentient being in the suffering realm, born with these seeds in their mind stream. Every life, life after life after life, until you perceive emptiness and become light. If you have the seeds in your mind, they ripen. When those seeds ripen in your mind, what happens? You perceive things ignorantly again. If you have a karmic seed for something to happen, when it ripens, it brings its result. So we've collected seeds to see things ignorantly. The seeds ripen, and we perceive ourselves and the things around us ignorantly. What does it mean to perceive things ignorantly, right? We see them as self-existent. What does it mean for something to be self-existent?
It exists from its own side, inherently, by definition.
Right.
Yeah.
It exists absolutely independently of the entire universe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And its existence depends on its relationship with its context, which is the universe.
Yeah, that's right. So if you look at, if we meditate, if we stop, if we're mindful, if we think about how we're going through the day, right? When we go through the day, we're going, there's a chair over there. The chair is over there. I'm perceiving the chair, which is over there. There's a door over there. That's over there. There's a clock over there. You know, I hear, people walking. All of these things are coming at me. All of these things are outside of me and coming at me, right? I am the radio receiver, and everything is outside of me with its nature, and which is its identity, and all of that is just sort of being broadcast to me, and I'm taking it in and I'm receiving it. That's unexamined perception. That's ordinary conventional perception, right? And it applies to everything. It's like my emotions, the way someone treats me, they're bad, they're good, that's pleasurable, that's painful. The pleasure is over there, and I want to go get it and bring it over here, right? The pain is over there, and I want to push it away and get away from it, right? Because the pain resides there, outside of me, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, with everything, right? So that's the regular, ignorant way of seeing things, right? So the third step then that he brings up is that we start to see things ignorantly, as in having their own self-existent nature, right? It resides over there. And that is the next step in the causal chain leading to our suffering, right? And he's making the point, if you have seeds for ignorance in your mind, then those seeds flower, then you start to see things ignorantly, meaning self-existently, being there from their own side, right? I mean, so take, for example, I don't know, cup of tea, or maybe there's some nice cookies out there, some, soft, chewy chocolate chip cookies. Let's take an example, right? If you like soft, chewy chocolate chip cookies, the tastiness is in the cookie, right? I mean, of course, they taste good. Chocolate chip cookies taste good, right? If I want to experience a tasty chocolate chip cookie, I need to go and get it, acquire it, take it into myself, and experience the tastiness that resides in that chocolate chip cookie, right? That's normal perception, and that's normal living, and that's just sort of functional life, right? So we see everything that way 24 hours a day. If there's a person I like, I have to go over there and interact with them in a way where I get what I want, or I have the experience that I want, because something resides in them that I want to experience or acquire. And so even as we talk about this, we're thinking there's a me here, which is relating to you there. And it's like these two balls, like this ball comes in contact with this ball, and then they interact like this, and they have this experience together, and then that's, a fun time. Boy and girl, and, had a good time because these two things came together, right? Because there was something here and there was something here, and they resided, the funness resided in them, in the interaction with them. So, and we relate to everything like that. So, I mean, does that mean I'm a bad person? I think this is a cup of tea. I think if I drink this tea, it'll be wet and tasty, and it'll satisfy my thirst, and it'll have a certain flavor, because, I see a bag in the cup, and the water's colored, and that means there's flavor in there, right? Normal perception, right? And I drank it, and it does taste like that, and it does have flavor. Is that wrong? I mean, what's wrong with that? Why is that suffering? What's wrong with perceiving the world that way? What's wrong with just saying it's a cup of tea and the taste is in the cup, and I drank it and the taste went into me? Why is that a problem? So this is what Lord Maitreya is addressing, right? So is it incorrect to say that this is a cup of tea? No, it's a cup of tea. I mean, it's not a problem, right? I mean, is there any mistaken perception to say this is a cup of tea? That's ordinary life. It is a correct, valid, conventional, ordinary life perception, and it functions, and that's our world, right? So, but is it infected by ignorance? Is that perception infected by ignorance? Yeah. Ultimately, it's not a cup of tea. Conventionally, it is ordinary daily life perception is a conventional cup of tea, right? No problem, right? So, but when I think about it, I'm having ignorance, right? I mean, I can even think, I'm trying not to think of this as a cup of tea. I'm trying to see the dependence of this, or the parts of this, or some other way of it existing. But no matter how you think about it with an ordinary mind, which is infected with ignorance, right? It's soaked in ignorance. There's layer upon layer upon layer of self-existent thinking. Like even if I'm thinking about how this is existing in dependence on something, or this is existing as a conceptualization, right, or a projection, part of my mind is over here saying, I'm seeing it that way. And then the idea of me is then infected with the same thing. And then I take it to another level. We just go down through level upon level upon level of self-existent thinking, right? And this is really the sort of point here that what my trade is making is until you perceive ultimate reality directly, you cannot put an end to your ignorance. You cannot really get to the bottom of that endless layering of ignorant, self-existent thinking, right? So, all right. So back to the example of the cookies, right? No problem to think that a cookie's tasty, and if I go over there and I eat it, I'll enjoy it. It's true. And if I like chocolate chip cookies, right? If I say, I was just over at Paradise Cafe before I came here across the street, and they had these lovely soft chocolate chip cookies, which I thoroughly enjoyed, right? I said, that's the best chocolate chip cookie in the world, right? Is it? Does that quality reside in the cookie? If it did, then every other cookie manufacturer would go out of business because the quality of being the best cookie in the world would reside in those cookies and radiate from those cookies. And everyone who ever came in contact with those cookies would detect the quality of that I'm the best cookie in the world, or this is being the best cookie in the world, and they would experience it that way. Because if the nature and identity of that cookie was that it's the best cookie in the world, right, everybody would pick it up. Everybody would get it. Because if by its very nature it's the best cookie in the world, if the nature resided in the cookie, if the identity resided in the cookie, right, everyone who came in contact with it would say, best cookie in the world. And they'd have they'd corner the cookie market, and every other cookie manufacturer would go out of business, right? Because it can only be that. If that's its nature, if that's its identity, if that's its essence, it can only be that for everyone. If it's not the best cookie in the world for everyone, if it's not a delicious chocolate chip cookie for everyone, then that doesn't come from the cookie. It doesn't reside in the cookie. It's coming from somewhere else, right? Coming from me. It's coming from my perception, obviously, right? So the cookie is pleasant, but it's not pleasant from its own side. It's coming from me. The perception is coming from me, right? And every other person that encounters that cookie has a different perception of it, and a different experience of it. Some people like it, some people don't like it, right? All right. So, there's basically three choices where the tastiness of that cookie could come from, right? I mean, it could reside in the cookie. It could just sort of, float in from outer space somewhere and attach itself to the cookie, or it comes from me. Those are really the only options. So if the quality of that cookie and the nature of that cookie is coming from me, there's an object there. There's a basis there that I'm projecting onto. But the experience of it, the nature of it, the identity of it is coming from the projection of my mind and the conceptualization of my mind and the experience of my mind, right? So it's everybody has their own experience of the cookie. And that is a very accurate, simple description of emptiness and what emptiness is. Emptiness means that the cookie does not have any nature of its own. It is empty of any self-existent identity. It is empty of any self-existent nature. There is a basis there which I am projecting onto based upon my mind and my senses, right? And that's true of everything, okay? There is something here. Obviously there's something here. I'm perceiving something. How does my mind take in the information through my senses? How does my mind process it? How does my mind conceptualize it? How does my mind define it and experience it? Right? If I had different receptors on my tongue or different neural abilities or different mental function, I wouldn't taste it this way. I'd taste something different, right? So, even the very fact that the taste of this thing is experienced comes from me. So that's the third step here. The third step here in Lord Maitreya's presentation is that we see things as pleasant or unpleasant, as attractive or unattractive, as nice or ugly, We see them as existing from their own side. You know, that cookie is nice from its own side. You know, that garbage smell is unpleasant from its own side. You know, so that's the third step in this chain of ignorant perception, which is leading us to the suffering life. All right. So where did the pleasantness of the cookie come from?
Karmic seeds.
From my mind, i.e., from my karmic seeds. Right. The same, so much of a muchness. I mean, can taste buds even taste a cookie? Is it just scientifically, is it physically possible for a tongue and the taste buds on a tongue to detect cookie? No, a tongue has taste buds, nerve receptors, which can only perceive certain sensations. There is no taste bud for cookie on the tongue. There is no taste bud for broccoli on the tongue, right? It doesn't exist. There is no ability to taste a cookie or broccoli. Where does the cookie or broccoli come from? Oh, well, science will say, well, you have olfactory receptors, which are very delicate on your upper palate, and then, you know, when you taste something, you get some sensation on your tongue, and you have some molecules which go up into your nose, and the combination of the molecules in your nose and the combination of the nerve impulses in your tongue are then put together by your mind, and you decide that that's broccoli, or you decide that that's an onion, or you decide that's too spicy and you don't like it, or whatever it is, right? That's emptiness, right? It's the emptiness of the cookie. There is no cookie. You can't taste a cookie. There's no such thing as tasting a cookie. Yeah.
But if with correct perception you see the ultimate reality of the cookie, there is something there.
Well,
right?
So we have to be very clear about what we're saying when we say you perceive the emptiness of the cookie.
Not me, but
Well, anyone,
an enlightened being, perhaps.
I mean, what does it mean? First, what does it mean to understand the emptiness of the cookie? I mean, just intellectually, right? Forget about direct perception. What does it mean to intellectually understand the emptiness of the
An
cookie?
ordinary being's
It's just an ordinary
intellectual description,
like we're talking right now.
like regurgitating.
Like we're talking right now. That's what I just said.
Yeah.
I mean, we just talked about it. I mean, I think people basically understood intellectually the emptiness of the cookie, right?
Right.
There's no cookie flavor there. There's no cookie shape and color there. You know, my fingers touch something, and my senses feel something, and my eyes perceive some shape and some color and some shadow, and you know, the nerve impulses go into my brain, and photons go into my eye, and some other, you know, some chemicals, you know, sodium molecules cross some barriers, you know, which result in the, you know, electrical change in my, you know, whatever in my brain, and then it all gets assembled into, oh, that's a cookie. Right? I mean, that's just emptiness. There is no cookie out there. There is a perception. There is data that we take in, and it is assembled and conceptualized as something, and then it's called that, and then it's experienced as that, and then it's related to that. So we just understood the nature of the lack of self. We just understood lack of self-existent nature. There is no self-existent cookie there. There is a cookie there because we experienced it and conceptualized it as such, right?
And we impute the idea of cookie on
Yeah.
that, and you tell us about cookie, and someone else agrees.
Where is
so
it?
there's this convention,
Yeah.
right? But in pure perception, pure,
Meaning,
as in an ultimate reality
Yeah.
perception by an enlightened being.
Yeah.
It would just be something without any concept layered onto it.
Mhm.
No
So,
conception.
yeah. So very important to be clear about what we mean when we talk about emptiness. You can't say something is empty unless you say it's empty of self-existent nature. I mean, emptiness is a shorthand, right? Anytime anyone says something is empty, it's shorthand, it's an abbreviation of the full statement. The full statement is, the cookie is empty of a self-existent nature. What does self-existent nature mean? It means having the identity cookie, have the flavor cookie, have everything that's got to do with cookie residing in it, right? So if you say the cookie's empty, what's it empty of? Always have to, anytime anybody ever says to you, whoa, that's empty, man, say, what's it empty of? I don't know. So it's mystical. You know, no. I mean, it's empty of self-existent nature. Meaning, I am providing the experience and the identity and everything else projected onto that blank screen, projected onto the stuff that's there. Now that's conventional reality, that's dependent origination, that's the nature of projection and perception, right? That's understanding dependent origination and emptiness conceptually, right? Now if you want to, if one works and meditates, studies and collects the virtue, etc., to have a very pure mind, a very still mind, a mind which can experience reality in a very pure, subtle fashion, right? What would they perceive? They would perceive reality free of concepts, free of elaboration, free of something projected onto the stuff, right? And scriptures talk about it in a lot of different ways. Different traditions and different texts talk about it in a lot of different ways. You know, a center with no edges, or clear light, or whatever. And again, the Matrix is a great example. You know, it's like, what is a reality like that we've never experienced? Well, I can't really describe it to you, can I? Because I don't have any language or any words to talk about it. Because I've never experienced it. You've never experienced it. It's like saying, go to the 15th dimension between the vibrating strings of quantum reality and see what's there. It's like, it doesn't help, right? Which is not to say it isn't there. The point is that there is a level of reality which is ultimate reality, which we cannot perceive with an ordinary human mind and ordinary human senses, or the mind and senses of most beings in any realm of samsaric existence, right? Suffering existence. There is a level of reality, which is ultimate reality, which we can perceive. And once we perceive that and have a direct experience of that, and we know that to be the true nature of existence and how all things exist, it changes who we are forever. It changes how we live forever. It changes how we relate to the world in existence in this conventional reality. It changes that forever. You know, so it's like, again, the Matrix is great. It's like, you know, you're unplugged from the Matrix. You've seen what's really there. You're never going to go back. You know, so it's just like that. So if and when one perceives ultimate reality, suchness, emptiness, thusness, lots of synonyms, once one perceives the way things are ultimately, really, truly, and one then comes out of that meditative experience and looks around and goes like, wow, this is all a distortion. This is all completely wrong. This is all just affliction and mental limitation and a mind that isn't functioning very well, and this whole way of perceiving and being and relating is just not it, not where I want to be, and certainly not true. You know, certainly not aligned with ultimate, you know, truth and virtue and purity and all the rest, whatever you want to call that, right? So that's the idea. And so Lord Maitreya is talking about how do we get there, right? How do you understand where you are? How do you understand why we're trapped in this suffering afflicted existence, and how do we get out of this suffering afflicted existence? How do we have to stop collecting negativity. We have to stop collecting negative karma. We have to stop living an afflicted life to become pure beings. You know, they're you know, you have negativity and affliction. You have virtue and purity. You know, not just, I mean, I want to say mutually exclusive. I don't want to say it that way, but you know, fundamentally different things, right? And so, karmically, being negative, non-virtuous, in thought or speech or deed, collects the karma to have that life in the future, right? So, I mean, to say it in another way, you know, just thinking about, I mean, to take it to a scientific level, right? The science would say, you know, the brain is plastic, you know, if it fires, it wires. Whatever thoughts you have create your neural circuits. The more you think certain thoughts, the more it wires that way, the easier it is to think that way, you become that way, you know, and then, you know, your brain forms that way and your mind works that way, you know. From a Buddhist perspective, we're not talking about it that, we're not addressing it at the level of neurology or brain circuitry, right? We're talking about it at a more subtle level. We're speaking of the mind and the more subtle energetic impulses of the mind, right? But we're basically saying that previously I configured my mind, right, and my perception to be the way it is now, right? The thoughts that I had in the past, the things that I said in the past, the things that I did in the past, infinite past, have led to having my present mind and senses which function the way they do right now, right? And in the present moment, right, I am configuring my mind into what it's going to become. Right? Everything I think right now, everything I say right now, everything I do right now is forming my mind and is producing the mind that I will have in the future. Right? I mean, it's kind of common sense in a way when you stop and think about it. Right? It's like whatever I think, whatever I say, whatever I do is producing me. Yeah, pretty self-evident. But it's simple and profound, right? Because we're talking at a very deep level. We're saying, not just tomorrow, not just next week, 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, 1,000,000 years from now, for infinite future, right? I'm evolving my mind stream, my subtle mind stream, energetically, neurally, whatever you want to call it, at multiple levels, to be formed in such a way that it will have an ability to perceive reality. So the Buddhist path, and the Buddhist practice, and the Buddhist goal is to say, I want to form my mind right now so that it configures and evolves to have pure, blissful, holy, paradisical, enlightened perception forever. Right? I mean, that is the goal, the stated goal of Buddhism, right? So everything I think, every moment of every day, everything I say and everything I do every moment of every day is creating my future state. That's all. That's karma. That's emptiness. That's karma and emptiness, right? And that's just what it is, right? So, so if we're thinking like that, right? If we're relating to the world that way, if I'm saying, okay, my mind, what I do with my mind right now is going to lead to my future perceptual state. If I can behave now in a way that involves my mind stream, my subtle energetic configuration, my wiring, everything. If I can behave in a way now, which produces a better one down the road, right? My life will improve. My valid perception will be of better and better things, right? I will perceive things as happier, holier, more pleasurable, etc., right? What does that mean in the present moment? That means that we have to be virtuous in the present moment. That means that we have to collect the right karmic seeds, the right imprints, right now in the present moment, that will produce that mental state. The mental state which only perceives a purer, better world in the future. That is the Buddhist path. That's ethics, that's karma, that's emptiness, right? That's it. So, in a practical sense, what that means is when you go out and you see a great cookie, do you say, that's my cookie, I want it, and I'm going to eat it because I want the taste? That's ignorance. What just happened? Seeds from the past, carried with us for ignorance, seeds flower, and to see things as self-existent. He said, there's a cookie over there, and the tastiness resides in the cookie, self-existent cookie. I like a tasty cookie. That's the next step, right? It's ignorant liking or ignorant disliking, the fourth step in my trans progression. Once you see a cookie as self-existent, you're only that far away as saying I like it or I don't like it from its own side. The tasty flavor or the disgusting flavor is in the cookie. That's the next step. Well, what comes after that? I want it. and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get it because I want that tastiness and I want to consume that tastiness. And I'm thinking about me, and if I can consume that tasty cookie, I get the tastiness. If someone else consumes the cookie, I don't get the tastiness. They get the tastiness. I want the tastiness. I'm going to get it instead of them, right? And so therein is the next step. We collect karma. Ignorance in my mind, seeds, infinite past, ignorance, flower. I see self-existing cookies. The tastiness resides in the cookie. I have ignorant liking that arises. If I can get the cookie ahead of somebody else, I consume the tastiness to my benefit. I got what I want. End of story. Collect negative karma, right? If one understands what we've been talking about, what does one do with a tasty cookie? You give it to someone else. You make sure someone else has a tasty cookie. And you say, do you like chocolate chip cookies? Would you like to have a chocolate chip cookie here? What if it's the last one? I really like chocolate chip cookies and I really want one and it's the last one. Should I offer it to the other person? Oh, it's a hard choice, right? I mean, that's how it works, right? It's the nature of it, right? But if one understands karma and emptiness and how all this works, you say, the only way I'm going to have a cookie that I enjoy in the future is if I offer this cookie to someone else. The only reason I'm experiencing a cookie is because my mind is configured to perceive that. How is it that my mind can even perceive a cookie? How is it that my mind perceives this cookie as enjoyable and positive, tasty? It's because in the past, I offered food to someone else that they enjoyed. Right? I collected the karmic causes, which form my mind and my senses and my experience in a certain way, which is now ripened into the result of perceiving data coming in through my senses in a certain way. And my reality in my world is there's something in it that I like, which I can enjoy. Unfortunately, it's pervaded with ignorance. Unfortunately, the ripening of the virtue of having a tasty cookie, whose karma I collected in the past to enjoy and experience, is mixed with the ignorant thought of it's self-existent. And if I get it ahead of somebody else, and I give it to myself and deprive someone else, I come out ahead. That's the problem. But if it weren't mixed with ignorance, it would be, here's a lovely tasty cookie, and I'm going to have so many cookies in the future. Let me offer this to somebody else, and I'll have vastly more cookies in the future, and I'll always have cookies that I enjoy in my life. That would be the logical, perceptual progression of somebody whose mind was not pervaded by ignorance. There's a thing what a lovely, beautiful plate of grapes. Let me offer it around to see who likes grapes and make sure everyone has grapes that they enjoy. And then life is satisfying, life is fulfilled, and my future is taken care of and assured, right? So that's wisdom applied, in daily life and in regular life. I think it's a good place to take a break. We're talking about cookies and grapes, right? Let's take a break and then come back and continue, right? I'm not sure if there are cookies or grapes out there. I hope we all collected the karma for some cookies and grapes out there. I have no idea what's on that table, right? Maybe an empty blank table, which is not really what we're talking about.